All right, we've already covered timing. We've learned about spacing because we turned on ghosting and we've seen where spacing is between each keyframe and the position of the ball. In this last video, we're going to cover the principle of squash and stretch. Now, most animators love this type of animation because it can add so much to an animation if done properly. It's something that can definitely be overdone, so it's always a good idea to stay on the safer side and be conservative with this effect. So let's jump in and learn a little bit about squash and stretch. So what I want to do is first select the ball and go to a contact frame right when it hits the ground right here. So what we want to do is we want to isolate the keys that we've already made. Now I'm going to go to Translate Y, and it's going to be this guy right here. So what we want to do is we want to isolate this frame. I want to set a keyframe for every attribute for our ball, but we don't want to screw up these tangent handles right here. Well, how do we work around that? There's another cool tool called the Insert Key tool, which is this guy right here. If we select that, um, I can actually just middle mouse click along, and I'm going to set two keyframes on either side of my contact frame. So right here on the line, I am just going to middle mouse, set a keyframe. I'm going to come to the other side, middle mouse, set another keyframe. Now let's do it again up here. So right here on the vertical line, I'm going to set a keyframe, middle mouse, on the other side as well, right here. All right, so we just set uh, two keyframes on either side and then another two keyframes on either side of our contact frame right here. So that means we can now set all of the keyframes or a keyframe for every attribute on our contact frame right here. And everything is going to be keyed, and we basically, the reason why I'm doing this is I want to lock all of this in because we want to affect only one little portion of this animation with the squash and stretch. And I don't want to mess up any of the other animation, nor do I want to mess up the tangent handles that we've created. So I'm going to press enter. I'm going to select our contact frame right here, and I'm going to hit S because if you remember, that is the shortcut for keying every attribute in the channel box. All right, so now we've saved our custom tangent handles here, and we can start working on applying a squash and stretch effect to our ball. All right, let's also key all the attributes on these other keyframes that we put down. So let's hit S. Let's move to the next one, hit S. Let's go to these ones, hit S. This one, hit S. All right, so that means that we can make changes to this keyframe right here, and it will not affect the rest of the animation or the surrounding keyframes. So let's turn on ghosting again, and let's come in here. Let's go to the frame right before it hits the ground right here. And this is where we're going to scale up. So I'm going to hit R, and I'm going to scale this one up. So if we were to just scale this up, we can see we're just making the sphere bigger in volume. It's just getting larger and larger. Well, what we want to do is maintain the volume of this object. So if we scale in one direction, that means we need to scale down in another. So to do that, it's a little difficult to scale because there's two directions here. I could just scale them individually like that, but it's a little handier to hold control, select the handle that I don't want to scale, and then just pull in. So this is a nice little shortcut. This locks the handle that I don't want to scale, and then it scales the other two handles that I do want to scale. So it's nice because it does that very uniformly. All right. So now let's do some rotation. So now what we can do is see the path of motion, which is another concept in animation. We can see the path of motion here, and we want to keep this in line. So let's rotate this so that it's going following the same path of motion towards the ground. And I am going to favor the ground just a little bit so that it kind of looks like it speeds up right at the end because we're increasing the spacing, and that's what makes it look faster. All right, let's key this, hit shift. Now, let's come to our contact frame right here, and we're going to squash this thing down. It has weight, it's going to get flattened a little bit. Let's flatten this a bit. So I'm going to hit R for scale. I'm going to flatten it. And let's scale it out on the other two. So I'm going to hold control, grab the handle. I don't want to scale, and let's scale that out. Right, so it looks like as it makes contact with the ground, it's squashed. All right, so now I'm going to push this back down. I'm going to stretch this frame after it back out. So let's go to back to translate Y. This frame right here, we're going to stretch this back out. So we're going to do exactly what I did with the other one. We're going to stretch it out. We're going to hold control so that we're squashing or thinning it out with the other two handles like this. And let's push it down so that it favors the ground a bit. All right, and let's turn it. So let's actually have this one not be as close to this squashed one here, which I didn't set the keyframe for, so I'll have to go back and redo that one. But let's have this one not be perfectly even with the one across from it. So it's kind of nice to not have things uniform when it's organic motion. Like we don't want these to both be even. It's nice to offset things a bit because it makes it feel a little more natural. So the tip of this thing is going to be higher up than the other one. And you can see that this one is lower down. So it's nice to keep it slower as it's leaving the floor and faster when it's coming in to touch the floor. All right, now let's go back to this one that I didn't set a keyframe for. Let me actually set the keyframe for this one. So I'm going to hit S. And let's go back to the contact frame right here, and let's squash that down again. So I'm going to squash that down. I'm going to hold control and squash it out. Ooh, I don't want to flip it. I just want to squash it out. There we go. And I'm going to hit S to keyframe that. All right. Now let's turn off ghosting. And let's make another play blast and see what we've created. So I'm going to do play blast, options. Everything looks good. Apply. All right. So let's make sure that I'm zoomed out a bit more so that I can see the full animation. And let's make another play blast. Play blast. Let's turn on looping. All right. So now when we play back, we can kind of see just for a brief moment that kind of squash and stretch effect. And it makes that first bounce feel different than the other bounces. It feels like it has a bit of an impact. It squashes there for a second, and then the other ones are just more stiff and they just kind of bounce, bounce, bounce. So, depending on the feeling and the type of ball, squash and stretch can be a very, very cool thing to start to apply to your animation, and it can be applied to everything. All parts of the human body can squash and stretch. When we're talking about character animation or any other type of animation, it can really have a lot of impact on what you're doing. Thinking of facial expressions, your cheeks will squash and stretch depending on the shape of your mouth and what you're saying. The skin in the areas in your elbows will squish together as you're moving your arm in certain positions. So consider that in every animation that you're doing. This concept of squash and stretch is very important for motion and a lot of organic movements. All right, so we've applied the concept of squash and stretch to our very first animation. Feel free to add this effect to the other bounces following the process of what we just did. Remember to increment and save as you work as well. All right, so we learned about spacing and timing in animation. We learned how to set keyframes and use the graph, and we worked a little bit with the principle of squash and stretch. Please don't forget to zip your project folder and take a nice break after submitting your project.